Hey there friends, and welcome back to Botanic Haven. If you're new here, this is your go-to channel for everything gardening, plant care and creating those beautiful green spaces both indoors and out in your yard. Today I want to share something that absolutely blew my mind when I first learned about it, and I think it's going to change the way you think about productive plants forever. We're talking about a tree that can give you harvest for 8 months out of the year, sometimes even more depending on where you live. Now, I know what you're thinking. Corn is pretty impressive, right? It grows fast, produces tons of food, and farmers have relied on it for centuries. But what if I told you there's a tree that can outproduce even corn in terms of sheer caloric value and nutritional benefits per square foot of garden space? Stick around because this is going to be good. About 3 years ago, I met this wonderful gardener named Daisy who lived in a modest suburban home with a backyard that wasn't particularly large. She had maybe 1/4 of an acre, and like most of us, she was trying to figure out how to maximize her harvest without turning her entire yard into a full-time farming operation. Daisy told me she'd been reading about permaculture and regenerative agriculture, and she kept coming across mentions of this one tree that supposedly changed everything for small-scale food production. At first, she was skeptical. After all, trees take years to mature, right? But then she planted just 2 of these trees, and within 18 months, she was harvesting fresh produce almost continuously from late spring through early winter. When I visited her place last fall, I couldn't believe my eyes. While her neighbour's corn had long since been harvested and the stalks were brown and dried up, Daisy was still picking fresh, nutritious food from her trees. That's when I knew I had to learn everything I could about this incredible plant. The tree I'm talking about is the moringa tree, sometimes called the drumstick tree or the miracle tree. And let me tell you, those nicknames are well-deserved. Native to parts of India and Africa, moringa has been used for thousands of years as both a food source and a medicinal plant. What makes it so special for us home gardeners is its absolutely incredible growth rate and its ability to produce edible leaves, pods, flowers, and even seeds almost year-round in the right conditions. In tropical and subtropical climates, this tree can literally produce fresh leaves every single week for 8 to 10 months of the year. Compare that to corn, which you plant in spring, harvest once in late summer or early fall, and then you're done until next year. The moringa just keeps on giving, and the nutritional profile is off the charts. We're talking more vitamin C than oranges, more calcium than milk, more iron than spinach, and more protein than eggs, gram for gram. It's like nature's multivitamin growing right in your backyard. I remember the first time I actually tasted fresh moringa leaves. I was visiting a botanical garden in South Florida, and one of the horticulturists there offered me a few leaves to try. The flavor was interesting, slightly peppery with this earthy undertone, and she told me that what I was chewing on had more nutrition than just about any other green leafy vegetable I could name. That moment really stuck with me, and it started me on this journey of discovering just how remarkable this tree truly is. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking this sounds too good to be true, or maybe you're wondering if this tree can even grow in your climate. Let's talk about that for a minute because it's important. Moringa loves warm weather. It thrives in USDA hardiness zones 9 through 11, which covers places like southern Florida, southern California, parts of Texas, Arizona, and similar climates around the world. These are regions where frost is rare or non-existent and where temperatures stay relatively warm year-round. If you live in a cooler zone, don't worry, you're not completely out of luck. Many gardeners successfully grow moringa in large containers that they can bring indoors during winter, or they treat it as an annual and replant each spring. The tree grows so fast that even if you have to start over each year, you'll still get multiple harvests before the first frost hits. I've heard from gardeners as far north as Zone 7 who've had success with this approach, and they tell me it's absolutely worth the effort. There's this guy I know named Oliver who lives in North Carolina, which is definitely pushing the boundaries of where you'd expect moringa to grow. He starts his seeds indoors in early March, transplants them outside after the last frost, and by midsummer his trees are 6 feet tall and producing leaves like crazy. When fall comes and the first frost warnings start appearing, he simply takes cuttings from his trees to root indoors over winter, then starts the cycle again next spring. He's been doing this for 4 years now, and he says his family has come to rely on moringa as a staple in their diet during the growing season. Starting moringa is super straightforward, and this is one of the things I love most about this tree. It doesn't require any special tricks or complicated procedures. You can grow it from seeds or cuttings, and honestly, both methods work great. If you're going the seed route, which is what most beginners do, you'll want to soak your seeds in water overnight before planting. This softens the seed coat and dramatically improves germination rates. I've seen germination rates jump from maybe 50 or 60% with unsoaked seeds to over 90% with properly soaked seeds, so this step really makes a difference. Plant them about 3/4 of an inch deep in well-draining soil and keep the soil moist but not waterlogged. Moringa seeds typically germinate within 1 to 2 weeks, and once they sprout, they take off like rockets. I remember when I planted my first moringa tree, I swear I could almost watch it grow. Within the first month, it had shot up over a foot, and by the end of the growing season, it was taller than I was. It was honestly one of the most exciting things I'd ever grown because the progress was so visible and so rapid. If you're in a cooler climate and starting them indoors, use large pots right from the beginning because these trees develop deep taproots quickly and they don't love being transplanted multiple times. A 5-gallon pot is a good starting size for indoor seedlings, and if you're planning to keep the tree in a container long term, you'll eventually want to move up to at least a 20-gallon container. The cutting method is even easier in some ways, and it's actually my preferred method now that I have established trees to take cuttings from. Just take a branch cutting about 2 to 3 feet long from an established tree. Make sure it's at least as thick as your thumb because thin cuttings don't root as reliably. Let it dry for a couple of days in a shaded spot. This allows the cut end to callus over, which helps prevent rot when you plant it. Then stick it directly in the ground or a large pot, burying about 1/3 of the cutting's length. Keep it watered regularly, and within a few weeks it'll start developing roots and new growth. It's almost ridiculously easy, and the success rate is really high if you follow these simple steps. I actually started 3 trees from cuttings last spring, and all 3 of them took root and grew vigorously. By the end of summer, they were producing harvestable leaves. This cutting method is also great if you know someone who already has a moringa tree. They can just give you a branch cutting, and you're in business without having to buy seeds or plants. Location and soil are your next considerations, but again, moringa is pretty forgiving compared to a lot of other plants. These trees love full sun. The more, the better. They can handle partial shade, but you'll get the best growth and the most abundant leaf production if they're getting at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight daily. In fact, in the hottest climates, moringa can actually handle 12 hours of intense sun without any problems. They're adapted to tropical conditions where the sun is strong and relentless. As for soil, moringa isn't picky at all. Sandy soil, loamy soil, even clay soil. It'll grow in just about anything as long as it drains well. The one thing moringa really hates is having wet feet. If your soil tends to hold water and gets soggy, you'll want to either amend it with sand and compost to improve drainage, or plant your moringa in raised beds or mounds. I've seen these trees thriving in some pretty terrible soil that wouldn't support much else, and that's part of what makes them so valuable for food security in developing regions and for lazy gardeners like me who don't want to spend hours amending soil. There's actually a great story about moringa being used in areas of Africa where the soil is depleted and poor. The trees still grow and produce abundantly, providing crucial nutrition to communities that might otherwise struggle with malnutrition. That resilience and adaptability is built into the very nature of this plant. Watering is another area where moringa makes your life easy, and this is really important to understand because it affects how much maintenance your tree will need. Young trees need regular watering while they're getting established. Think about watering deeply 2 to 3 times a week for the first month or 2. You want that taproot to grow down deep into the soil, searching for moisture, because once it does, your tree becomes incredibly drought tolerant. But once they're settled in, moringa trees are remarkably forgiving when it comes to water. Their deep taproot allows them to access moisture that shallower-rooted plants can't reach. During hot summer months, a good deep watering once a week is usually plenty, and if you get regular rainfall, you might not need to water at all. I've actually found that moringa produces more concentrated, flavorful leaves when it's slightly stressed by drought compared to when it's pampered with constant moisture. Of course, if you want maximum leaf production for harvesting, keeping them moderately watered will give you the lushest growth. But the point is that these trees are survivors. You can go on vacation for a week or two and not come home to a dead tree. I learned this the hard way one summer when I went to visit family for 10 days and completely forgot to arrange for someone to water my garden. Most of my vegetables looked pretty sad when I got back, but the moringa tree, it looked exactly the same as when I'd left, still green and healthy and growing strong. Now let's talk about the harvest, because this is where moringa truly shines and shows why it can outproduce corn in ways that really matter for home gardeners and small-scale growers. With corn, you plant it in spring, wait 3 to 4 months while it grows, and then you get this intense harvest period of maybe 2 to 3 weeks when the ears are at their peak. You pick them, you eat them, or preserve them, and that's it for the year. The stalks die back, you clear the garden bed, and you start planning for next season. With moringa, the whole experience is completely different. You can start harvesting leaves when the tree is just a few feet tall, usually within the first 2 to 3 months of planting. You don't have to wait years like you would with most fruit or nut trees. And here's the magic: the more you harvest, the bushier and more productive the tree becomes. It's almost like the tree wants you to harvest it. When you cut branches back, it responds by sending out multiple new shoots, each of which will produce fresh leaves. You can harvest leaves continuously throughout the growing season, and in truly warm climates with no frost, this means you're getting fresh greens month after month after month. There's this gardener I know named Rose who tracks everything in her garden with spreadsheets because she's a bit of a data nerd, and I love it. She calculated that from her 3 moringa trees she harvested over 80 pounds of fresh leaves in a single growing season. 80 pounds! And that's not even counting the drumstick pods, flowers, and seeds. When she compared this to the yield from the same square footage planted with corn, the moringa won hands down in terms of total nutritional value. Sure, corn gives you calories and carbohydrates, which are important, but moringa gives you a complete nutritional package. Protein, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, healthy fats from the seeds, all from one tree that requires minimal maintenance. If this guide has helped you, write 1 in the comments, and if not, write 0. This way, I'll know which tips are most useful for your garden. Let me give you some practical harvesting tips, because there's definitely a right and wrong way to do it if you want to keep your tree productive and healthy for years to come. First, always harvest in the morning after the dew has dried but before the heat of the day. This is when the leaves have the highest moisture content and the best flavour. The leaves are also more tender at this time, which makes them nicer to eat, whether you're using them fresh or cooking them. You can harvest individual leaves by plucking them off, but I find it's more efficient to cut entire branch tips. Take about 6 to 8 inches off the end of branches, which will include several sets of leaves. This method encourages the tree to branch out and become bushier rather than just growing tall and spindly. Don't be afraid to prune aggressively. Moringa responds beautifully to heavy pruning and will come back stronger than ever. In fact, many experienced growers recommend cutting the tree back to about 3 to 4 feet tall once or twice a year to keep it manageable and to stimulate maximum leaf production. I was nervous the first time I did a hard pruning on my tree, cutting it back from about 8 feet to just 3 feet. It looked so bare and sad, and I wondered if I'd made a mistake. But within 2 weeks, I started seeing new shoots emerging all over the trunk, and within a month, it was absolutely loaded with fresh, tender growth. That experience taught me to trust the process and not be afraid to prune hard. The drumstick pods are another harvest opportunity that you absolutely shouldn't miss, and they're really what gives moringa its other common name. These long green pods appear after the tree flowers, and the flowers themselves are quite beautiful. Small, white and fragrant, growing in clusters. The pods that develop from these flowers are best harvested when they're young and tender, usually about 6 to 8 inches long and still bright green. At this stage, they're crisp and flavorful, similar to green beans, but with a slightly asparagus-like taste that's really unique and delicious. You can stir-fry them with garlic and ginger, add them to curries where they soak up all those wonderful spices, steam them and serve with butter, or pickle them for a tangy preserved vegetable. If you let them mature and dry on the tree, you can harvest the seeds inside, which can be eaten roasted like nuts, pressed for oil, or saved for planting more trees. There's this wonderful gardener named Ivy who makes the most amazing pickled drumstick pods. She uses a simple vinegar brine with garlic, mustard seeds and spices, and they're absolutely delicious. She's turned something that most people in temperate climates have never even heard of into a signature dish that she brings to every potluck. People always ask her what they are, and she loves introducing them to this unusual vegetable. The flowers are also edible, by the way, and they have a mild, slightly sweet taste. You can add them fresh to salads, or some people make them into fritters by dipping them in batter and frying them. Every part of this tree seems designed to feed you. The nutritional aspect of moringa really cannot be overstated, and this is a big part of why it outperforms corn and most other garden crops when you look at the complete picture. Corn is great, don't get me wrong, but it's primarily a source of carbohydrates and calories. It provides energy, which is important, but it doesn't give you much in the way of vitamins, minerals, or protein. You need to eat corn alongside other foods to get a complete diet. Moringa, on the other hand, is what nutritionists call a complete food. The leaves contain all 9 essential amino acids, making them a complete protein source, which is extremely rare in the plant kingdom. Most plant proteins are incomplete, missing 1 or more essential amino acids, which is why vegetarians and vegans have to carefully combine different plant foods to get complete proteins. But moringa gives you everything in one package. They're loaded with vitamin A in the form of beta-carotene, which is crucial for eye health, immune function, and skin health. The vitamin C content is so high that just a small handful of fresh leaves gives you more than your daily requirement. We're talking about 3 to 4 times more vitamin C than an orange in the same amount of moringa leaves. The iron content makes moringa valuable for preventing anemia, especially for people who don't eat a lot of meat, or for women who have higher iron needs. And the calcium content is higher than dairy products, which is fantastic for bone health and particularly valuable for people who are lactose intolerant or vegan. When you dry moringa leaves, these nutrients become even more concentrated. Gram for gram, dried moringa leaf powder has some of the highest nutrient density of any food on the planet. This is why moringa powder has become such a popular supplement in health food stores, usually selling for ridiculous prices. I've seen small jars going for $25 or $30. Why pay that when you can grow pounds of it yourself for basically the cost of a packet of seeds? Maintaining your moringa tree is honestly so simple that it barely feels like work, especially compared to the fussy vegetables and fruits that need constant attention. One question I get all the time is about pests and diseases, and honestly, this is another area where moringa just makes life easy. These trees are remarkably resistant to most common garden pests and diseases. I've rarely seen serious pest problems on moringa, though occasionally you might notice some aphids or caterpillars munching on the leaves. The good news is that even if you see a few pests, they rarely cause significant damage because the tree grows so fast it just outpaces whatever's nibbling on it. The tree can afford to lose a few leaves to insects without any real impact on its overall health or productivity. If you do want to address pests, a simple spray of water to knock off aphids or hand-picking caterpillars usually does the trick. Because moringa leaves are so nutritious and you'll be eating them regularly, you definitely want to avoid chemical pesticides. Neem oil spray can be used if you have a more serious infestation, and it's organic and safe to use on food crops. As for diseases, the main thing to watch for is root rot from overwatering, which we already talked about. Keep the soil well drained, don't water excessively, and you'll likely never see a disease problem. I've been growing moringa for several years now, and I can count on one hand the number of times I've had to do anything about pests or diseases. It's just not an issue with this tree. In its natural state, moringa can grow 20 to 30 feet tall, becoming a substantial tree that could shade out other plants and make harvesting difficult. But for home gardeners, keeping it smaller and bushier is much more practical and actually increases productivity. This makes harvesting easier because everything is within reach, and it increases leaf production because you're constantly stimulating new growth. I recommend keeping your tree pruned to about 6 to 8 feet tall, which is a comfortable height for harvesting without needing a ladder. To do this, simply cut the main trunk back when it reaches the height you want, and this will force it to send out lateral branches. Then regularly harvest from those branches throughout the growing season, which essentially serves as ongoing pruning. You're getting your harvest while simultaneously shaping the tree and encouraging more growth. It's beautifully efficient. At the end of the growing season or in early spring before new growth begins, you can do a more aggressive pruning, cutting the entire tree back to 3 to 4 feet. This might seem drastic, but trust me, the tree will respond by putting out vigorous new growth loaded with tender, delicious leaves. This annual hard pruning also helps control the size of the tree and keeps it productive for many years. Without pruning, moringa can become woody and less productive as it matures, but with regular cutting back, you're essentially keeping it in a constant state of youthful, vigorous growth. In terms of fertilizing, moringa is again pretty easygoing compared to heavy feeders like tomatoes or squash. These trees are what we call light feeders, meaning they don't require heavy fertilization. A few inches of compost spread around the base of the tree a couple of times a year is usually plenty. This provides a slow release of nutrients and also improves soil structure and water retention. If you want to give it a boost during the peak growing season, a balanced organic fertilizer applied monthly can increase leaf production noticeably. Some growers use fish emulsion or compost tea with great results. Both provide a nice boost of nitrogen and other nutrients that encourage lush leaf growth. The key is not to overdo it. Too much nitrogen can actually lead to overly lush growth that's more susceptible to pests and diseases, though as I mentioned, moringa rarely has these problems anyway. I personally just use compost and occasionally some aged chicken manure from my small backyard flock, and my trees produce abundantly. They're not picky and they don't need to be pampered with expensive fertilizers or complicated feeding schedules. For those of you in cooler climates who are thinking about growing moringa in containers, let me give you some specific tips because this is totally doable and can be really rewarding. You'll want a large container, at least 20 gallons, though bigger is better if you can manage it. Remember that moringa develops a substantial taproot, so depth is important. Look for containers that are at least 18 to 24 inches deep. Use a well-draining potting mix rather than garden soil. A good quality potting mix designed for containers will work perfectly. And make absolutely sure your container has adequate drainage holes. Moringa will not tolerate sitting in waterlogged soil, so drainage is crucial. Place your container in the sunniest spot available, whether that's a south-facing patio, deck, or even a sunny spot indoors near a large window if you have one. Container-grown moringa will naturally stay smaller than ground-planted trees, which is actually perfect for cool climate growers. You can keep it pruned to 3 or 4 feet tall, harvest regularly throughout the warm months, and then when frost threatens in fall, you have options. You can either bring the whole container indoors if you have space and a sunny location, or you can take cuttings to root indoors and start fresh next spring. I know several gardeners in Zones 6 and 7 who do this successfully every year. Yes, it's a bit more work than just leaving it in the ground year-round like warm climate gardeners can do, but they tell me the nutritional benefits and the satisfaction of growing their own superfood make it absolutely worthwhile. As we wrap up, I hope I've convinced you that moringa deserves a spot in your garden if you have the climate for it, or at least in a large container if you're willing to give it the care it needs in cooler zones. This truly is a tree that can transform your approach to home food production in ways that few other plants can match. It grows fast, produces abundantly for most of the year rather than just once, requires minimal care compared to most vegetables, and provides nutritional benefits that few other plants can match. When we talk about agricultural productivity in terms of nutritional diversity, vitamins, minerals, protein content, and the length of the harvest period, moringa pulls ahead of corn in remarkable ways. A single mature moringa tree can produce 50 to 100 pounds of fresh leaves per year, plus pods, flowers, and seeds, and you're harvesting continuously for 8 months instead of having one brief harvest period. The tree requires less water than corn once established, can grow in poorer soil without extensive amendments, doesn't need replanting every year which saves time and effort, and provides multiple edible products from leaves to pods to seeds. Whether you're interested in growing your own superfoods to improve your family's nutrition, increasing your food security so you're less dependent on the grocery store, reducing your grocery bills by growing expensive health foods at home, or just trying something new and exciting in the garden that will impress your neighbors, moringa checks all the boxes. Start with one tree, learn how it grows in your specific conditions, experiment with different ways to harvest and prepare it, and I think you'll quickly understand why people who discover moringa become such enthusiastic advocates for it. Thanks so much for spending this time with me today here on Botanic Haven. I'd love to hear about your experiences if you decide to grow moringa, or if you've already been growing it. Share your tips and favourite ways to use it in the comments below. Happy gardening, everyone, and here's to creating those beautiful, productive green spaces that nourish both body and soul.